Alright, hi folks. It's time to talk about the newest card in Marvel Snap, Mirage. I got this card so that you don't have to. As you can imagine, this is probably going to be a bit of a, skating review, maybe? Yeah, maybe. So, Mirage is a 2 energy, 2 power card that has the on reveal effect that it copies the lowest cost card in your opponent's hand into your hand, and you give it +2 power. First things first, is Mirage worth opening Spotlight caches for? I'm gonna say no. She's not. She shares this week's Spotlight caches with Thanos and Master Mold. So, like, I guess if you really want those, Thanos is good. Like, Thanos decks have a place in the meta, and they're quite good. Like, Thanos Destroy decks are quite good. Thanos Control decks are pretty good. And Thanos is a fun card, so that in itself, just Thanos decks are typically pretty fun to play and kind of complex. Master Mold is skippable. Master Mold kind of only really works in like Ronin decks. Otherwise, you don't really have a reason to play him. So if you have a Ronin thing you want to do, then I guess you can get Master Mold. But he's not like essential or anything. But she debuted in Series 4, so she was a 3,000 collector's token. Is she worth 3,000 collector's tokens? Again, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no, she's not. I got her for 3,000 collector's tokens so that I could playtest her to just find out what she's like, see if there's anything you've overlooked from just theory crafting in advance, what she's going to be like. To evaluate this card, the obvious comparison card to Mirage would be Sentinel. Sentinel is a 2 energy, 3 power card that adds a copy of itself to your hand when you play it. So it has more upfront power than Mirage does, but what you get from it is going to be another Sentinel. And when you play that, you're going to get another Sentinel, and when you play that, you're going to get another Sentinel. But Mirage, on the other hand, you could get anything from Mirage. You could even get a Sentinel. But no, if you play Mirage like on curve, if you play her on turn 2, then your opponent is typically going to have a low-cost card in their hand. They're going to have like a 1 energy or 2 energy card, and that's what you're going to get, and it's going to get +2 power. So you have slightly less power than Sentinel from the first card you play, but then the second card you play is probably going to have like slightly more power than Sentinel. Now, is this good? So here's the thing. What kind of deck would you put Mirage in? And the answer would be you would kind of put Mirage in the same sort of decks that you would put Sentinel in. Decks where you want to have a big hand, decks where you want to generate new cards into your hand. So we're talking decks that are built around either Devil Dinosaur, where you want to build as big of a hand as possible, or the Collector, where you want to add new cards from your hand through other means than drawing them. And typically, like the Collector and Devil Dinosaur tend to be used in the same sort of decks as well. But then the question is, like, do you want to have 2 cards in your deck that are like Sentinel? Is this a deck archetype that would like to run another Sentinel in the deck if they could? No, not really, because Sentinel is just like a utility card to fill up the early turns, but it's not like a powerhouse. It's not like a heavy hitter in that deck. It's just kind of a pretty good card in that deck. So adding another Sentinel to that deck is probably not something you would do if you could. So it's more of an either-or situation. Like, either you run Sentinel or you run Mirage. So for Mirage to see play, then she would have to be better than Sentinel in those decks. Is she better than Sentinel in those decks? I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say that she's worse than Sentinel in a Collector/Devil Dinosaur deck. Now here's my reasoning why. You might high roll, you might get something good as the second card in the deck, but say that you play her on curve. Alright, say, let's not look at the high rolls. Let's not look at the best possible outcomes of playing her if you get like a 0 power death or something. Let's look at what the average outcome is going to be of playing her. And the average outcome is you're going to play her on turn 2 when you're going to get like a 1 or 2 energy card. So first up, obviously, for Mirage to be better than Sentinel, you would have to play the second card you get. If you don't play the second card you get, then she just has 1 power less than Sentinel, which makes her worse. So you have to play the second card as well for her to be a net positive. That means that you have to get something that's playable. If you get something like, I don't know, a Mr. Negative or something, then you're just screwed. With Sentinel, you know what you're gonna get. You're gonna get another Sentinel. But here is the big one, okay? When you play Sentinel, you get a Sentinel. When you play a second Sentinel, you add a third Sentinel to your hand. You can play as many Sentinels as you want without losing power on Devil Dinosaur. But when you play Mirage, you get a second card, and when you play that card, you don't get a new third replacement card in your deck, right? Which means, if you play the second card, that's -2 power on your Devil Dinosaur. Whereas if you play a Sentinel, that's not -2 power on your Devil Dinosaur because you get a new Sentinel into your hand. So the +2 power that Mirage gives your next card is actually negated if you play that card, as far as Devil Dinosaur goes. So if you discount that +2 power, then Mirage is just a lower power card compared to Sentinel. That gives you a random card from your opponent's hand that's typically gonna be a 1 or 2 energy card. And that's honestly worse than Sentinel. Second problem. I've seen like people build deck lists with her, and like the typical, like the most common ways of building Devil Dinosaur decks right now is like a hybrid of different ongoing cards. You either do like Devil Dinosaur plus Ronan, or more commonly right now, Devil Dinosaur plus DarkHawk. The reason for this is also that both decks run Mystique, so that your Mystique, you have flexibility. You can either copy DarkHawk's ongoing ability or Devil Dinosaur's ongoing ability based on the situation. So if you run like a DinoHawk deck with Devil Dinosaur and then you have DarkHawk, then you're going to be throwing a bunch of rocks into your opponent's deck to build up DarkHawk. You're going to play Korg, you're going to play Rock Slide. And guess what's going to happen then, people? You guessed it. There's a pretty good chance if you play Mirage in one of the later turns that she is just going to give you a +2 power rock. Is that good? No. No, it's not. So Mirage, unfortunately, sort of like doesn't really fit all that well into the Devil Dinosaur / DarkHawk archetype, or rather, Sentinel fits better in those decks. So Mirage probably doesn't go into that deck, unfortunately. So where would you put Mirage? You would put her in some other sort of deck that also sort of kinda-ish runs Sentinel, which probably would be something like Classic Serra Control, that sort of deck archetype. But I still think that like the overall power like increase from playing something like Sentinel is sort of negligible. Because we're not looking at high rolls here, people. We're looking at consistency and we're looking at average outcomes. You're going to be playing hundreds or thousands of games and you want to know how a card performs on average, not how it performs in either the best case or the worst case scenarios. And Mirage, on average, is about the same as Sentinel. It performs about the same as Sentinel. And everyone has Sentinel already, which means that you have very little reason to spend tokens on this card. Why would you spend tokens on a card that does kind of the same thing that Sentinel does, except it's like a bit more high-rolly? Another card you can compare it to would be like Cable, for example. Cable is also a 2 energy, 2 power card that gives you a card from your opponent's deck, but doesn't give it the +2 power. So in that regard, like Mirage is better than Cable. Mirage also gives you information about cards that are in your opponent's hand, which might be valuable. And I guess like a third card you could compare Mirage to would be something like, for example, Forge. Forge is a 2 energy, 1 power card that also gives a +2 power buff to something else you play, except in that case you get to pick for yourself what the +2 power buff is going to be spent on. Typically a card that you were going to play anyway. Like that's the issue, right? What if you get a card from Mirage that you just don't want to play, or just don't get an opportunity to play? Then the +2 power buff is kind of useless, whereas with Forge you were always going to get that +2 power buff. So like that's kind of where she's at in the meta. She's better than Cable. She is on par with or slightly better than Forge. and she's like a little bit worse than Sentinel. Is that a card that you want to spend 3,000 tokens on, or that you want to open spotlight caches for? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no, it's not. So you shouldn't do that. Don't spend resources on this card like me. Don't do that. I'm doing it because I want to make content about it so that you don't have to. So like, if anything, I'm going to say that this card might actually go so far as being like a buff candidate in the future. Where like, this is a card that they probably have to make a little bit better to justify putting it in your decks. It's just not very good. So that's the review, people. It's just not very good. But thank you for listening, as always. If you found this informative, if you like this sort of content and you want to hear more of my ramblings, then maybe consider subscribing. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys again some other time for something completely different.